So Jonathan, you showed some slides this morning about the peering traffic demands. So let's talk about those first. I guess this is just a continuation all year long, right? That traffic continues to surge.
Or you're going to see from an overall traffic growth, 30% CAGR growth on fixed networks and on average 50% CAGR growth on mobile infrastructure. What we saw starting with the pandemic was an immediate surge of anywhere from 10 to well over 30, over 40% immediately. Like as soon as the shelter-in-place orders hit a particular geography, we saw that peering traffic go up. Now, here's the interesting part. Peering traffic doesn't actually give you the full story because it's just peering points. Like it just shows you which traffic is from outside the service provider's infrastructure to inside the service provider's infrastructure. But there's a whole set of traffic inside the SP's infrastructure that doesn't necessarily show up in that kind of reporting. And what that means is I could have a whole host of CDNs or a number of different CDN providers inside of my network. And I'm going to have one stream coming into the CDNs, and then the CDN could be sending out 400,000 copies of that so people can watch it. And so my net aggregate bandwidth isn't shown in that peering traffic because the traffic's simply going to come for CDNs from the other side of the peering point. I give you that as an example because we've got other anecdotal data, some service providers around the globe that they just saw tremendous growth in the amount of traffic, and not only that, but the busy hour went from people watching TV at night, movies, Netflix, Disney Plus, et cetera, to that extended throughout the whole day. And we all became broadcast studios. You're a broadcast studio, you're a broadcast studio, like I'm a broadcast studio, we're all broadcasting. And the networks really were not built for that. And so you saw some initial, bouncing around with challenges in certain pockets. And then certainly there's a couple pockets in Latin America where they had underinvested on that last mile for the last several years. And so, we had to help them in a pretty short order to increase their capacity. And so that happened. That's kind of the different pieces that we saw in addition to the peering points and peering traffic.
It suggests that the peering points themselves are coming under greater pressure, right? So would we expect to see more upgrade cycles then at those peering points, or?
I would say what we saw immediately, and I'll give you a great example of WebEx. So people were at home, people were at work using WebEx, and then now all of a sudden you can say, okay, now I have 70,000 employees or 100,000 employees, which is real, moving to a distributed work environment. And then as a workplace, you have a choice. Well, do I send all of those 100,000 connections over a VPN back into my corporate facility and then something back to the internet, or I just let them all go connect to WebEx? And so what we saw happening was different service providers had to very rapidly increase the size of their pipes going into WebEx to be able to handle the traffic that normally would have come from the corporate network, which already has a big pipe, and now it's coming in over the internet into WebEx. And so we saw a number of service providers needing to add capacity into the different WebEx data centers so that we could service those. And I'm just giving the WebEx example. There's lots of other, think of all the other major applications and how the workflow changed from I'm at work, I'm going to Salesforce, to now I'm at home and I'm going to, like, everybody's experiencing that. But I think that initial blip has mostly been handled. I think what you're kind of intimating at, which is what everyone's trying to determine right now, is if I'm normally going at 30% or 50%, and I saw a spike in early March, what do I use as my foundation? Do I assume that spike's going to go down, or do I assume that's my new baseline? Because if that's my new baseline, and I'm still growing 30 to 50% on top of that, depending upon which infrastructure I'm in, I need to buy a lot more gear. If that's my new baseline. And so those are the conversations that we're having, obviously, with all the major service providers around the world, is trying to come to the conclusion of, is that consuming bandwidth ahead of when it normally would have been consumed? And so it's part of the normal 30 to 50% growth, or did we just reset the baseline up 10 to 40%? Because that's a big question. And answering that question, determines, if there's any capacity to be added, and then how much capacity you want to add.
Okay, awesome. The second thing that caught my eye was you're highlighting Silicon One, Cisco Silicon One, and of course that's I guess almost 6 months since you guys unveiled that. And if I remember, that is sort of a clean sheet approach to accelerating infrastructure. Could you give us an update?
Sure. We could not be more excited about where we are with Silicon One. We have seen just a huge embrace from our customer base, whether it's web scale, hyperscale, service provider, large kind of Fortune 500 enterprise, government agencies, like anybody who views themselves as critical infrastructure, what I would now call essential infrastructure, and they have scale. They are looking, very hard at this platform. Not even for those of you, not everybody needs 260 terabits in a single routing entity. That's a lot of capacity. But even if you just look at our fixed platforms, having a single router with 10.8 terabits that has all the routing functionality that you need is extremely compelling. And now I can take something that was almost as tall as me from 5 years ago, and now I can, if I wanted to, I could stick it in my luggage and take it into carry-on. Just to give you kind of the size that we're talking about, and the power savings that they're going to get by moving to this new architecture is extremely powerful. So we've seen adoption across all the customer segments I mentioned, but also we're seeing people very interested and appreciating that Cisco is transforming its business model as well. So we're getting great feedback and great engagement across both of those avenues.
Okay. You also showed a slide for the 8000 series family. And I think one of the notable things there is 400 gig. That's coming along in that series, right? Um, any updates on that then, on the 400 gig? And
well, 400 gig is here. It's supported. We're shipping. I think the main challenge has been around scalable optics capability, and our customers able to get the number of optics that they need to deploy it. But I think that's a short-term thing. We're well into that. We're moving into the point where people are now waiting for ZR plus optics, which are expected towards the end of the calendar year, as an industry. And so I think that will drive additional people to 400 gig, but it's absolutely is going to be a big tailwind. The other thing I would comment, and I gently touched upon it earlier, but I would add that the approach that we've been taking, we're trying to reset the industry, not just from a technology innovation perspective around the technology we're building, and not just around the business models. We also want to reset how we're engaging with the market as well. And this is why we launched the product after we started shipping it, right? Which is a very different approach to all of my peers. And since we launched it, we have officially FCS'd the platforms. And I also gave a little bit of a teaser at the December launch that we had, talking about how we were going to engage with, even more so with OCP and Sonic. And I don't know if you noticed, but everybody after I said that went and started saying how they were going to go and join Sonic. Well, we're shipping it. We've FCS'd it already. It's out the door, and everyone else is still just doing trials and posting blogs.